Welcome back, guys. Today we're going to talk about, we've previously discussed textual evidence and what it is. Today we're going to talk about how we can use textual evidence to support our answers, to prove that we're right. Your ability to cite textual evidence to prove that your answer is correct helps you stand out against somebody else whose only argument for why they're right is, well, just because. So think of it like a step process. It's a multi-step process, right? So step one, you got to read the text. These are your notes for the day. So step one is you got to read the text. All right? Once you read the text, you can move on to the next step. And after you've read the text, you have to make inferences or make connections to real life and then ask questions to yourself. Or if you're looking at a passage with questions, make inferences and connections back to those questions at the end of that passage. And once you've read the text and once you've made your inferences and your connections, then you can go to that final step, that third and final step. And that's when you underline specific parts of the text. Go back into the reading and underline, highlight, circle, whichever you prefer, the parts of the text that explain your thinking and explain your answer to the question or questions. And when it comes time to cite your textual evidence, now there's multiple ways to do that. Right here, I've given you 5 sentence starters that you can use to cite your textual evidence. So you give your answer, and then when you're citing your textual evidence, you can use any of these 5 sentence starters. The text says, and then you tell me either verbatim what the text says, and you quote it, or you summarize what the text said. The author wrote, on page blank, it states this. You can go and you can give the exact quote. Or number 4, based on paragraph blank, you summarize that paragraph. That proves why your answer is right. And number 5 is just to show you that it's not always the text. Sometimes if the text comes with an illustration, you can use that illustration to prove that you're right. So number 5 is the illustration proves, and then whatever your answer is. So once you've mastered this 3-step citing textual evidence process, and you understand how to use the citing textual evidence sentence starters, we can now answer questions in paragraphs. And instead of our 1-sentence answers, our answers are longer and better. And so if you follow what I call the ACES format, ACES because you can see it spells ACES, you can come up with paragraph answers. And a lot of times students are overwhelmed by, oh God, I have to write my answer in a paragraph. That's a lot of sentences. But if you follow this format, it builds on itself, and it's not as daunting and as scary and as hard to do as you think. So step 1, the A in ACES, is to answer the question. So underneath the steps that we just did over here, you need to write this ACES format. So step 1 is to answer the question. And this should take 1 sentence, a 1-sentence answer to the question. And it should build the question into that sentence. And I'm going to give you an example of how to do that here momentarily. The next step is to cite evidence. This is what we just talked about. You read the text, you answered the question, now find something from the text that proves your answer. Now, citing evidence can come from class, it can come from the reading, it can come from other sources, something that proves that you're right. And this is 1 to 2 sentences in someone else's words or thoughts. Not verbatim. You can summarize it, you can sum it up. This is what this author thinks. But this is 1 to 2 sentences in somebody else's words. And these are just things that prove that your answer is right. And you're going to see it continues to build. So you've answered the question, you found something from the text that proves that you're right, and now the E in ACES is explain in detail. And in 2 to 3 sentences, in your own words, you're going to explain how this proves that you're right. Explain in your own words how what you cited proves that your answer is the right answer. And then the S is sum it up. It's just one sentence that sums up the whole thing, sums up your whole argument. And now what you've done by following this ACES format is instead of just answering the question in a sentence and hoping that it's right, you've proved that it's right. You're not hoping that it's right anymore. You've gone back and you've found the evidence and you've explained it and you have proved that your answer is the right answer. And if you can do this, intellectually, you are unstoppable. This is why this citing textual evidence is important, because it proves that your answer is the right answer. No one can just tell you you're wrong. You have proof that you are right, and you can explain that you are right. Now we're going to go one step further. I'm going to show you an example that I have done, and I'm going to mark it up so that you can see. Apparently I spelled something wrong here. Here we go. Okay. So the question that was asked is, how is Martin Luther King a leader in the civil rights movement? All right. And I'm going to go through and I'm going to break it down, and you're going to see what I said. So it says, Martin Luther King is a leader in the civil rights movement because he helped form nonviolent protests and he met with government officials to help change laws equally. All right? Or change laws for equality. Sorry. Now this, if you'll look right here, this is my A. This is where I answered the question. All right? And you can see I put the question in my answer. So the question was, how is Martin Luther King a leader in civil rights? Martin Luther King is a leader in the civil rights movement because ... Okay? So I put this question in my answer, in my first answer. All right? So I took it, I put it in the form of a sentence. Boom. That is the A. I answered the question. In the next couple sentences, it says, in Martin Luther King's biography, the author describes many civil protests that King set up and helped organize that eventually brought about change. Additionally, the author points out the numerous occasions that King met with state and national level leaders to help change laws. What I did in that little setup right there, I'm going to put it over here this time. This is the C. This was the citing part. I answered the question. I cited information that proved my answer. And I want you to notice that I didn't take any quotes. I didn't copy any author word for word. I just took what the author said, I put it in my own words, and boom, I cited that right there as proof that my answer was right. I answered the question. I took parts from the text to prove that that was right. And now the E, the explanation part. All right? The protests that Martin Luther King Jr. set up helped to change segregation and other Jim Crow laws in the South. The meetings with high-ranking government officials helped to change the laws and helped to take a step towards equality for African Americans in the United States. And so what I've done, again, is that I've done the next step, which was the C. The E. I explained it. All right? I explained why what I cited proved that my answer was right. So you can see if you do it in this order, it should all build on itself. So I gave an answer. I cited from the text that proved my answer was right. I explained those citations. And then the last part, I just simply summed it all up. All in all, the efforts made by Martin Luther King to organize and deliver nonviolent protests and his influence in changing of laws proved that Martin Luther King is a leader in the civil rights movement. So right here, that's the S, and I summed it up. And again, I didn't just copy anything else that I wrote. I didn't copy anything that the author said. I just took my argument, I summed it up in one quick sentence. Boom. And I hit home. If you can master this format right here, you can almost get any question I ask you correct. As long as you can answer it, you can find some citation that proves you're right, you can explain those citations, and you can sum it up. There's not a lot of questions that you can't get right. Again, so it starts with the textual evidence piece. You have to get this part right first. Once you get this part right, you, using that ACES format, can answer a simple question like this, and instead of giving one sentence, give a well-articulated argument as to why you are right. We're going to practice this throughout the year. If you check Canvas, there's going to be an article with a question I'm going to ask you to do this on. If you have any questions, reach out to me, and as always, have a great day.